Delegates, please join me in warmly welcoming Anwar and Thomas to the stage.
Thank you, Khalil.
Thank
you so much. Okay, is the microphone working, guys? Can you confirm? I think it is. Hi again, everyone, and thanks for having me again, but also most importantly for my guest, Thomas, who's a client of Martian Logic and an incredible guy, so I've decided to collaborate with him on the topic. I want to stress that today is nothing to do with my company or nothing to do with HR systems. It's about the impact of AI across all job functions and what we feel would be the role of HR and the responsibility of HR in terms of how to handle that potential threat and turn it into an opportunity. So without any delay, let's get started. We need the
clicker.
The clicker.
You got it.
So you know who I am, and we've been introduced Thomas also. So the first slide is, I just was going to ask a question before we start to get an idea about how many people got a couple of questions here. Who's used an LLM like ChatGPT or anything like that to play with it at home or with the kids or at work or anything like that? That's good. Okay, very good. Thank you. Second one is who wanted but maybe wasn't allowed to use it at work. They recognized maybe they could do something with it. It could be useful, but maybe at work wasn't something that you're allowed to use. Okay, very good. Thank you. And the last one, who's at work actually recognized this is something we really need to start to incorporate and maybe doing some formal training about how we can leverage this kind of tech. Okay, there's a couple. That's very good to see. That's awesome. Okay, so with that in mind, that will help me just to, when we're explaining what it is, not to waste your time and how much we explain certain things. So thank you very much. So the first part of the slide, the way we're going to do this, I'm doing about 4 or 5 slides, and then Thomas is doing 4 or 5, and we're switching, so total about 20 slides. Generative AI, I'm sure everybody knows what that is. That was, by the way, coming from Gen AI, from ChatGPT. I've asked a question in a prompt, and it's basically a system, an AI system, that can generate things, hence the generative AI, and I'm sure most of you already know this. Things such as text, or video, or an image, or a song or music, for example. So then I want to talk to you about what is an LLM. That's why I've used the word LLM, because ChatGPT in many ways is just an LLM. And an LLM is a large language model. You know, machine learning and AI have been around for a long time. You might be surprised. Started the research 40 years ago when probably the personal computer wasn't around. Still the expensive $500,000 to buy a Unix-based, which sort of a version now you hear of the word Linux, was called Unix, the first OSs that were used outside of the mainframes, which is decent size as opposed to a big fridge that you can't bring to an office. So it started back in those days, but lost momentum after about 5-10 years of research, and then sort of restarted in the early 90s. In saying that, I wanted to really explain what an LLM is. So I start with what an AI system is. It's basically start with a neural network or an algorithm, and then you train it, whatever set of data you want to train it at, because this is what you eventually want to use it for. So the problem domain of interest to you, whoever is doing that. And then hopefully once you've trained it with the right training data sets, it'll be able to help you to predict this kind of data, that problem domain kind of based data. That's at high level, something to keep in mind for the rest of the presentation. I thought it would be useful. So then that's the first tier, what an AI system is. With that in mind, then we go, okay, what a large language model. This is a recent thing. Instead of predicting a word, you want large language, you want sentences, you want articles, etc. Yeah? But what's interesting about it's language. LLMs meaning it's text. And that's what ChatGPT was until recently they've added the image thing, but you know, it's still pretty primitive, the image stuff. But nevertheless, ChatGPT was all about chat, about talk, about language, right? So therefore, you can imagine, based on what we said before, it's being trained on text, on our languages from all over the world, different languages, right? So AI system, large language model is a version of an AI system because it's trained on languages. And then ChatGPT and Llama from Meta, the Facebook company, their system's called Llama, and there's tons of them out there. They're just different flavors of LLMs. So now we go to the next slide. Oops. I've put this prompt in both, there's an ideogram, a particular LLM, and there's a ChatGPT, and I put the same prompt, exactly the same prompt in both, about the question was, as you can see, representing ChatGPT ingesting the entire human vocabulary into it, and that's the different images that I've got that look like books and stuff. You're in a library and it's just bringing all that data in, and this looked like all the thing in that cloud coming into that central computer. Very interesting. I thought I'd just put it up there. So now I want to go into a bit more details. I'm hoping you'll find a bit more enlightening about really what this whole ChatGPT and LLMs are all about. Just set the tone for you a little bit. Based on what we said before, a ChatGPT, you probably know already, the GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. It's just a flavor of an LLM. They came up with a very interesting, clever architecture to give it a bit more capabilities, if you like, but nevertheless, still a form of LLM. So, an LLM is basically trained, or ChatGPT is trained on all publicly available text on the internet, and that's in any language, because they found a way to translate languages and bring it into the same kind of one single system. So if we start with that premise, anything available on the internet is being ingested into that system in a sense, right? So then that's about 10 trillion words, but to be precise, there are trillion tokens, 10 trillion tokens. So what they do, for example, I've put an example here. This is a great topic. These would be 6 tokens. Even the exclamation mark, special character they call it, that's a token. So they're storing anything out there, our entire human intellect in any language and whatever, into this sort of standardized set of tokens. And it's around the 10 to the power of 13, which is 10 trillion tokens, which a token is 2 bytes, so that translates to about 20 terabytes of storage, pretty much to store anything that is in text that's available on the internet in any language anywhere in the world. So that's really what ChatGPT did. But very interesting, what I'd like you to do, in terms of the timing for someone like for these LLMs, and in particular ChatGPT, because I mean, it is really powerful when you think about it, right? Because it would take a human 170,000 years to read all that information, the data out there that's represented by those 10 trillion tokens. It would take 170,000 years for a human to ingest that data, or even to read it, let alone remember it and digest it, understand it properly. But the timing was really incredible, and this is why we saw such a huge success so quickly. You go, where did that come from, and how can it be so powerful? Where did that come from? That name ChatGPT just came up from nowhere. Well, it took someone like Google, just for simply making information available. Clearly, they made a great business model from it, but that encouraged everybody in the world to take any book and make it available online, so it gets Googled and it's available, and people can find it, so they can sell it, so they can repurpose their content and make money from it. So 20 years or whatever, Google and other search engines, or their predecessor even, humans have been doing that, helping to get every single content that's available, all our human intellect, in a sense, to make it online, or most of it anyway. So that happened over years and years. And then social media came after that, right? And fueled that further. All the stuff that we normally don't have in books, sort of normal conversations and things that are, a lot. Typically when you're writing a book, you're more civilized. In social was everything, right? So that added even more interesting kind of content that's available now on the internet. And so that's why ChatGPT and these LLMs right now have been so successful. All the stuff for trillions and trillions worth of dollars of infrastructure has been paved, is available for them, was just there for the taking. Once that technology was available, meaning they were able to train an algorithm with text. Once they figured this out, the text is there. Our human intellect is available there for them to take it and train that algorithm with it. So that's really interesting, the timing. So I just got something interesting there, how because of the internet and all that stuff that's available, the social media and all that, you can imagine I've got, human laundry is available there, which is the dirty and the not dirty. So there's all the arguments and all the hate speeches and all the stuff that's available, the arguments and the fighting online, and all that is being ingested as well. And so therefore, when you hear about these AI systems, every single one of them, the biggest problem, and we find that at Martian Logic when we were dealing with our own AI system, for example, to predict candidates against a job, is the bias. Recruiters have bias. A lot of people, the nicest human being, they're beautiful people and they don't have a problem with that candidate, but some reason they look at that name and last name, they know they cannot imagine this person can be doing that job. They're not even racist, they're not even biased, they don't know it, right? We cannot take that recommendation into account. For example, we put a weighting system. If you have not gone through that resume up and down and look at screening questions, maybe watch the video, we're not going to take that recommendation into account. So we had to unbias it, and we're still struggling with that problem to a certain extent. So bias is huge in any system. And bias, what does that even mean, bias? What I think is bias, you might not think is bias. So that's always going to be there, and you need to really navigate through that. So that's very interesting. Now, I think it's Mr. Thomas going to start. Over to you, Matt.
Thanks. I think based on the number of hands that were up for Anwar's first few questions, that was kind of how I started exploring with ChatGPT and Gemini and Bard and these tools. And this is a lot of the news articles that came out last year is kind of, this panic around kids using it or university students using it to write their essays. And at the moment, a lot, and I'm guessing, I probably share this experience with a lot of people in the room, everyone who raised their hand and said, yep, I've used it occasionally, a few times, use it to start off and say, write me this document or write me this policy or this business case or help me write this thing or tell me this joke. And that's kind of the stage that we're in, represented by this picture on the left, where we've got these reasonably powerful tools, but they're kind of simple building blocks, and we can use them to help make us a little bit more efficient. Over the next 5 years, generative AI is going to turn into this whirling maelstrom that touches every aspect of your digital life, at work and at home, and at your kids' school. So anything that's got language in it that you use is going to have some aspect of generative AI over the next few years. And so that's what this is meant to represent here. And the strap line is that it's going to be more disruptive than the internet. Now, it's kind of hard to imagine, because the internet was one of the most disruptive technologies that's ever existed. But there's a couple reasons why, and the key thing is the content generation. So the internet gave us access to information. You could have incredible apps, it could perform all these analysis, but every piece of content still needed a writer. Every app still needed a designer. Everything on the internet needed some human to help create it. And now that's no longer the case. The second thing that is going to drive this disruption is the speed. So the Industrial Revolution, 200 years, we needed to build train tracks, needed to build a lot of infrastructure. With the internet, it was the same story. The internet's been around for 30 years, but a lot of it, we needed infrastructure. We needed, telephone cables, we needed broadband, we needed fiber. We needed a lot of physical infrastructure. We needed phones, we needed laptops, we needed battery technology. With generative AI, all of the building blocks are already in place. The only thing that they don't have is enough AI chips for the processing. But everything else, the way that generative AI, the paths that generative AI is going to use to get into your work and to get into your home life, all of those already exist. We already all have mobile phones. We already work online. We already work with computers. It's all the infrastructure is already there. So the speed of adoption is going to be very rapid. On the left, we've got 10% better. So horse to horse and cart, you got this idea of gradual iterative improvement as our technology improves and our efficiencies improve and productivity goes up. With LLMs, because they can generate that content, in some use cases, you're going to see examples where it's like you're moving from the horse cart to the bullet train. So I'll give you an example. With creating, if you wanted to say create this image that's here on the right, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, you need an experienced Photoshop designer. Someone who's trained in Photoshop, they've got tens or hundreds of hours of experience, maybe they did a degree, they've got a degree in graphic design. You give them a concept, they develop that concept, they sketch it out, they maybe sketch out on a pad, then they develop it in Photoshop, and after all that training and all that time and all that effort, you end up with an image like this. And now, I made that image in 5 minutes using ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot. And that's the kind of magnitude jump. We're going to see these huge leaps in productivity where something that used to take tens of hours now can be done in a few seconds by someone with no training. And so I think after what I've just said, hopefully you're all thinking about how it's going to fit your job. The answer is quite a lot. If you work with language, if you need creativity, if you solve problems, if you do any sort of analysis. These things here, you don't need to read the text. Is it an analysis by Accenture? So every line is a job, and on average, for all of these jobs, 40% of your tasks are ripe for impact by automation and generative AI. And another 20% can be augmented. So the idea here is that every email that you send, every meeting that you're in, every document that you write, all of it is going to involve generative AI. And that will all happen over the next 3, 4, 5 years. It's already happening now. Every Excel spreadsheet that you open will have generative AI in it. Now I'll pass back over.
Thank you very much. Good stuff. Okay, that's a very interesting topic. You might be thinking why we're talking about students as opposed to the workplace, but clearly they're very much related. I mean, we train students, the idea is, especially at uni, to be ready for the workforce, and that's the people we hire in many ways, right? Not everybody we hire is a grad, but, part of our recruitment intake, I guess. So it's very interesting, and you'll find there's a very quick correlation to the workplace. So there's a reason I've selected this, and it's very close to my heart. So, you can ask that question, should we let students write their essays, as a matter of fact, for their homework, for whatever, use these tools? Or should we, for example, invent some tools that will detect that kind of cheating? This essay was created using a blah, 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 because we have some great, another sort of AI tool that's maybe smarter than your AI tool, so I can detect if you created it with an AI tool. I don't know, maybe something like that exists. But should we be doing this? Which position would be more on the right side of history? That is really the question here that I'm hoping to contribute to the debate of it. I don't know if we can find the answer to it. Very, very interesting. So if I go to the next slide, I've got a few interesting segments that will help us maybe to get closer to maybe think we have an answer. If you think about what we've been doing, I saw this guy doing a TEDx talk about this, and I got this idea from him. I thought, this is so interesting. The way he described it, he said what we've been doing even at unis, forget the schools, still a lecturer in many ways, I can even say very confidently 80% of our practices in terms of teaching methods is I'm transferring knowledge from my head to your head, my audience, and then, but in the case of the students, then I have this exam to examine how much was transferred into your head, and you're supposed to absorb everything I give you, and that's when you become the champion. Yeah, really? That's gonna continue now to go? But this already been challenged even. Forget the AI, forget ChatGPT. This should have been even challenged by smarter companies even 20, 30 years ago, in my humble opinion. And I'll put my argument forward to you why. So go to the next slide. This is a statement here. In the future, but that's why I said, even forget AI. You could ask that question even without AI and what's more coming from AI, which is, it's still in its infancy now, let's face it. And I know a lot of limitations in it. But nevertheless, with AI or even without AI, in my humble opinion, the question is, or the statement here, no one is going to hire you in the future. The more and more there's more automations, some of them AI-based, some of them aren't, right? The more there's automations to do things that can be automated, the question becomes, will people hire you because of how much you know, or how much, or how do you, or what you know, how to deal with what's out there, how to leverage what's out there, how to solve problems using all these tools. Your knowledge of all these tools and their capabilities and what they're good at and not good at, where they can be used and not being used. Which one is going to be more valuable? Maybe it's a combination of the two, but certainly not the first one by itself. That's, at least I can say that safely. So that's what I meant here with if you've got these building blocks, I can use the example of programming. In programming, we have, when we build software in my company, in Martian Logic, where you've got the high level sort of approach and modules, and then you've got the building blocks. So let's just imagine, and that is going to happen super quickly, a lot quickly. There's going to be, ChatGPTs of the world that will build those building blocks, the smaller things as part of that system we're trying to build. The code will be generated like that. We hit a button, boom, 50,000 lines of code, 20 different functions, classes, if you're familiar with these words, will be just built. Okay, no worries, this module, this block now is ready to connect with this, and this connects with that, and we have a system running, right? So then what I'm trying to say is not to have to worry about building these small blocks. Your job becomes a lot more interesting as an architect, how you're seeing what you need to connect to provide the solution. And that question, the solution, is the billion-dollar question in this conversation. And that's on the next slide. The solution for what? The problem? Is that the real problem? Is that a symptom of the problem? What is really the problem? That is the conversation, as I'll explain in a minute, that where we need to be engaged in, as opposed to putting our head on the computer, punching the code to create those building blocks, that 50,000 lines of code. And that is where most of those disruptions in the jobs, that's the kind of migration that needs to happen. From the low-level stuff to really go back to your client, to the problem domain that you, as a company, you're solving. Are you really having enough conversation with that client to really know what the problem is? Or are you barking at the wrong tree? That is where a lot more interesting conversation and a function for us humans and our employees to be engaged with. And that's where the shift that you want to start to encourage as HR. That's the narrative that you want to start to win in all the meetings, starting from the top management meetings and all the way through. It's that shift in our intelligence and knowledge of where our time should be better spent, as opposed to fighting about whether we let ChatGPT build that thing for us or that thing. Worry about your client, the problem domain you're trying to solve. In some cases, there isn't a client, forgive me, but just at high level, the problem domain you're trying to solve, have the conversation there, challenging the whole assumption about, yeah, this is the problem we're trying to solve. Okay, how about if this is really a symptom? Someone just said, I'm really grateful to change my life in terms of my health and the way I eat and stuff. And he said, you find a tree has got some leaves that are a bit sort of start to go brown, and your first instinct to get that thing from Bunnings and start to spray on it. And then you realize later, you're walking down, taking the dog for a walk, you see these roots spreading over, and your next door neighbor, or even the next door neighbor, pouring engine oil on it for the last 5 years, and you didn't realize. And that's why those little things are dying up there. You've been spraying chemicals on them. So really where the problem is going to be where our time should be better spent across the board. Any function in your company, as a company that's coming together across a bunch of job functions, trying to solve a problem, a domain problem. I'm pretty much done. I'll hand over. I've said exactly what sits here. So the problem domain thing that we talked about, and to listen and think and analyze and make sure we're not working on the symptom, and to encourage our people to be involved more in the problem, as opposed to you've got this team that talks to the client and you guys don't need to worry about it. Here's the problem, just go and fix it. No. These boundaries will be wiped out, will be merged a lot. Everybody needs to know and worry about the problem, and encourage people to quickly start to put these iterative solutions in place. Don't overplan. It's a death sentence. Start to create a solution quickly and test it against, take it back to that problem domain client. So look what we've got at the moment. What do you think about this? That's how we build our software. We involve our clients all the time. It's very iterative, very interactive. I'll go through this quickly. Speaking of the educational institutions, I can tell you, I can't remember, I was too young probably, but when the calculator was introduced, I have no doubt, and some people might have read something about that and they say, yes, exactly what you just said happened. I really didn't even research it, genuinely say that. But I can imagine 35, 40 years ago when the calculator was emerging, so many of these amazing schools everywhere in the world, there would have been so many heated debates about the ethics of, we're here to teach the students how to use their brain. We want to make sure if they're stuck on some island and there's no calculator, they know how to find solutions using their brain. They need to know the times table. They need to know this. They need to know all that stuff, right? That would have been a huge argument back then, yeah? But it took a while. I'm not sure how long it took. Again, I haven't researched it, but I can see in my head, you can imagine that. After a little while, they came to a position where there's a place for it, meaning there's a bit of this and a bit of that. We will teach them about the concept of what a times table mean and all these more difficult math stuff. But you know what? We're even making them stages. Some people don't even need to know too much about them for what they want to do in life. But also there is a room for the calculator. We want to even teach them how to use the calculator, which is the case now, right? I helped my son in year 11 in his maths, and there was stuff about the calculator. I found it complicated because I've never used really calculator much. I've moved more straight away into computers. And so, yeah, we found a place for it. The same thing happened with computers at those same institutions, and there would have been a vigorous debate about that and the ethics of that and how much we need to really teach them a concept. They need to know how to do this. And then at some point in time, they realize, okay, there's a place for it. There's a compromise. It needs to be there somewhere in the curriculum. And the same thing with the LLMs. And you can see from the workplace point of view, it's the same thing. And these are the people you're going to be hiring anyway. So that's really what I wanted to say. To be on the right side of history, I've already talked about this. It's really about getting your people and preparing your people to start to be in a position and have the skills to be engaged more with the problem domain people, and to not take assumption about what the problem is, and to be able to have quality conversations. I say to my people, the quality of the solution has got a ceiling. Do you know what that ceiling is? It's the quality of the conversation you've had with the client, and how quickly or not quickly, or how cynical or not cynical you were about the assumption of the problem. That is your ceiling. You can only be as good as the quality of the conversation. No, it doesn't matter how good of a programmer you are. You could be barking at the wrong tree. So it has nothing to do with the quality of the code. So the machine can build that code. It's the quality of the conversation the machine can't do, at least for now. So over to you, Thomas. Thank you, mate.
I think that's exactly right. What Anwar's pointed out is the more you adopt generative AI, the more time you have for those quality conversations. And so we wanted to leave on and talk about a couple of practical tools that as HR, I'm HR too, can make change. In the past and currently, we're the guardians of the workforce. We have the business achieve its goals. We use strategic workforce planning, job assessments, recruitment, restructures, all these general types of things. And when we're talking about digital transformation, the key word that jumps out is this idea of strategic workforce planning. We'll say I have a 12-month plan and a 3-year plan and a 5-year plan, and we're going to respond to the competitive landscape. The problem with these tools is that they take too long and they need too much information. If you try and make a strategic workforce plan about how your company is going to develop with generative AI over the next 5 years, we don't know. We don't know what generative AI is going to be like in 5 years, so how can you make a plan for it? And it just takes too long to takes too long to implement. But every minute that we are not doing something, our competitors are, and they are they're the ones who will leave us behind if we don't act. So HR, I think, is in a really unique position to influence from exec to management to team leads and educate them around this idea of the threat and opportunity presented by generative AI for lifting the productivity and lifting the quality of the conversation in your workforce. And we're in this kind of unique position where we touch all these levels and to help drive adoption and adaptation to generative AI. But if you can't make a long-term plan, it's the idea of strategy without a plan. So you pick a direction, such as we want to adopt generative AI. What does it mean? Well, we don't really know. But what we do know is we're going to get started tomorrow. We'll get started today. So you agree a direction, not an outcome. You don't pick milestones, have 3-month goals, have 12-month goals, have 3-year goals. You don't have enough information to do that. What you can do is get started tomorrow and critically only work with early adopters. Your managers will know who these people are. Only work with early adopters. They are the ones who need to be personally invested in bringing generative AI into your organization. If you pick someone who doesn't want it, they're not going to do a very good job. And so two kind of really practical, simple things that anyone who's in HR has opportunity to do is to start seeding generative AI through the organization. So first one, really simple. You grab a couple of teams that work together, one early adopter out of each team. You work with the managers, you have a steering committee, you meet once a month. The team self-assembles, they pick their own topics. You give them some time each week to work on it, and they pick out the recurring communication tasks that suck time out of their working days and out of their working weeks. And they go away and they work out how to apply generative AI to the problems that those particular teams are facing. And once they solve one process or one task, then you knock that one off, you roll it out, and you move on to the next one. So this is seeding generative AI from the ground up with people who are on the ground, not some big governance strategic plan. It's people solving their own problems. And this is going to build this generative AI capability from the ground up within your organizations. Another example, but with individuals. We all, as HR, meet with our managers and talk about the performance of their teams. All right? Most, if not all, companies are going to have performance goals at the management level, at the team level, hopefully at the individual level. Managers pick 1, 2 of their early adopters and give them a monthly task. Find something that uses language that you do all the time, a recurring task. Everyone's got them. Everyone who works on a computer has got these types of tasks. Pick those early adopters, set them a performance goal, get them to iterate on a solution. And then you review once a month. Once it's streamlined, you roll it out. So hopefully you can see the advantage what Anwar was talking about. The more time, the more tasks you can pass over to generative AI, the more time you have to focus on stuff that really matters. We all talk about lifting the game and lifting productivity and making big strategic decisions. Generative AI is a pathway for us to do that. Go forth and disrupt.